In the entire history of the Star Wars galaxy, across thousands of years of war, empire, and rebellion, no ship has left a mark quite like the Millennium Falcon. It has been called a piece of junk by nearly everyone who's ever seen it for the first time. Its hyperdrive has failed at the worst moments imaginable, its hull is patched, its systems are illegal, and its maintenance log reads like a list of near-death experiences. And yet, this worn-out Corellian freighter has been present at some of the most decisive moments in galactic history. It carried the people who destroyed the Death Star, it helped end the galactic civil war, and when the galaxy needed someone to answer the call one final time, this same battered freighter was the one that flew. What makes this story worth telling is not the ship itself, it is everything the ship survived. No other vessel in the Star Wars galaxy passes through so many different hands, serves so many different masters, and still ends up at the center of every crisis that matters. In both canon and legends, the Falcon's history stretches back 60 years before the Battle of Yavin, through the hands of criminals, loyalists, gamblers, rebels, and scavengers who each left their mark on it. It was never the most polished vessel in any docking bay it sat in. It was never the most respected, but from a factory floor on Corellia to the final battles that determined the fate of the galaxy, it kept flying, and the galaxy kept needing it to. Drawing on both the current canon and the Legends continuity of the expanded universe, the Falcon's full history deserves both timelines to be told properly. Chapter 1. Born a Nobody. Before there was a legend, there was a serial number. Before there was a Millennium Falcon, there was a plain, unremarkable light freighter rolling off a production line on the planet Corellia, a ship that no one in the galaxy would have looked at twice. Around 60 BBY, 60 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Corellian Engineering Corporation completed a standard issue YT-1300 light freighter designated YT-492727 ZED. It was a workhorse vessel built for cargo hauling, designed for reliability rather than speed or glory. It had a distinctly flat disc-like hull with two forward cargo mandibles jutting from its nose, a side-mounted cockpit, and just enough room inside to haul freight and not much else. The YT-1300 model was everywhere in the galaxy. Thousands of them ferried goods between planets, navigated trade routes, and served as the backbone of independent shipping operations. There was absolutely nothing special about serial number 492727 ZED. It was one ship among many, built for a galaxy that needed goods moved from one place to another and cared very little about how that happened. In canon, the early ownership history of the ship is somewhat murky. Records from the Bureau of Ships and Services, the galactic authority responsible for tracking transponder registrations and ownership, were inconsistently maintained, and many transactions involving smaller freighters went unregistered. What canon does confirm is that the ship eventually passed through several hands before entering the possession of Lando Calrissian, the smooth-talking gambler and smuggler who would give the vessel the name the galaxy came to know. The Legends continuity, however, fills in the earlier chapters of the ship's life with remarkable detail, drawn primarily from James Luceno's novel Millennium Falcon, published in 2008. According to Legends, after leaving the CEC production line under the name Corel's Pride, the ship was first operated by Corel Industries Limited, a corporate owner with little attachment to the freighter beyond its usefulness as a transport vessel. The ship changed names repeatedly in those early decades, cycling through aliases like Fickle Flyer and Meadle's Misery as it passed between owners, each one leaving a small mark on the ship's growing patchwork of wear and modifications. Then, around 48 BBY, a pair of sibling smugglers named Cal and Dova Brigger purchased the ship, then operating under the ironic name Jackpot, and rechristened it the Hardwired. They upgraded its hyperdrive and ran illicit cargo through the core worlds under the protection of a criminal consortium called the Smugglers Confederation of the Cularen System. Greed undid them. When they crossed the Confederation's strict prohibition against the slave trade, a bounty followed immediately. Dova was captured and executed. Cal renamed the ship the Wayward Son, changed its registry, and threw in his lot with a loose collective of pirates led by a retired smuggler named Iako Stark. It would prove to be his final mistake. During a mission gone wrong on the planet Troikan, Cal Brigger was killed, leaving the Wayward Son adrift with no captain and no future. It was a pattern the ship knew well by now, outliving every person who thought they owned it. The ship sat without a clear owner for 15 years, passed between minor operators and registry changes, carrying the scars of its troubled history. Then, in 29 BBY, it found what may have been its most purposeful chapter yet, as a tool of resistance. A standard freighter that had survived death, crime, and betrayal was about to be handed to some of the most principled principal people in the Republic and became part of a secret war against the galaxy's darkest ambitions. Chapter 2: The Stellar Envoy. By the time the Clone Wars erupted across the galaxy, this humble freighter had already lived several lifetimes, but its most consequential chapter was just beginning. Around 29 BBY, a secretive organization known as the Republic Group purchased the aging freighter and registered it under a new name, the Stellar Envoy. The Republic Group was, on the surface, a trade organization promoting economic cooperation between Coruscant, Corellia, and Alderaan. In truth, it was a clandestine network of loyalists, senators, Jedi sympathizers, and political operatives who believed Chancellor Palpatine's administration was dragging the Republic towards authoritarianism. The Stellar Envoy became their covert courier, flying sensitive documents, encrypted communications, and carefully chosen cargo on missions that the Republic Group's members hoped would help preserve the democracy they feared was slipping away. 2 pilots were assigned to care for the ship and fly it wherever the Republic Group needed. Tobe Jadak, a former swoop racer with exceptional skills at the controls, and his best friend, Rhys Derman. For roughly a decade, Jadak and Derman maintained the Stellar Envoy meticulously. The ship received professional upkeep, careful modifications, and the attention of 2 men who genuinely cared about its condition. They'd even reached an informal agreement with the Republic Group's leadership to eventually purchase the Envoy for themselves, a dream they carried with them through years of secretive service. That dream was destroyed in an instant near the end of the Clone Wars. In 19 BBY, the same year Anakin Skywalker fell to the dark side, the Jedi Order was destroyed, and the Galactic Empire rose from the ashes of the Republic. The Stellar Envoy was flying a top-secret delivery run above the moon of Nar Shaddaa, known throughout the valley as the Smuggler's Moon. A massive bulk freighter called the Gendarian Valley 3 collided with the Envoy without warning. Rhys Derman was killed instantly. Tobe Jadak was thrown into a coma so severe that he would not wake for nearly 60 years. The Stellar Envoy, catastrophically damaged, was left to drift in the orbital junkyard surrounding Nar Shaddaa. In canon, a parallel moment connects the Millennium Falcon to the pivotal events of Revenge of the Sith. Shortly before Anakin Skywalker's fall, the Stellar Envoy is briefly visible in a docking bay on Coruscant, present at one of history's most tragic turning points, unknowingly sharing space with the man who would become Darth Vader. It is a small detail, but a remarkable one. The ship, which would go on to help destroy the Empire, was physically present at the moment the Empire was born. The wreck of the Stellar Envoy did not remain in the junkyard for long. A salvager named Bammy Decree, operating with backing from a small-time crime lord named Reg Taunt, purchased what remained of the freighter as scrap. What Decree found was a ship that looked destroyed, but still had bones worth saving. Using components stripped from a scrap YT-1300P passenger variant, a slightly different configuration than the original, Decree's team reconstructed the Envoy from its core outward. It emerged from this process as a fundamentally rebuilt vessel, with updated systems and a hybrid frame that blended old and new Corellian engineering. The ship then passed through a series of owners over the following years, each adding small modifications and leaving behind traces of their time at the controls. One owner, a pilot named Quip Fargill, gave the ship a name that would stick, naming it after the Bat Falcon, a bird known for its speed, agility, and predatory grace. Over time, through further registry changes and informal transactions, that name evolved, and somewhere in the murk of unregistered deals and unnamed middlemen, the freighter ended up in the hands of a man who would define it forever. The galaxy's most famous ship was about to get the most important owner it would ever have, and he would rename it something the entire galaxy would one day know by heart. Chapter 3: Lando's Pride. A gambler, a showman, and one of the most naturally gifted pilots in the galaxy, Lando Calrissian did not merely own the Millennium Falcon, he created it. At some point during the years of the Galactic Empire's early reign, Canon places this around 10 BBY. The gambler and smuggler Lando Calrissian won the YT-1300 freighter in a game of sabacc. It was Lando who registered the vessel under the name that would become legendary, the Millennium Falcon, and it was Lando who, with considerable investment and his characteristically impeccable taste, This transformed the ship from a battered workhorse into something extraordinary. Lando's vision for the Falcon was shaped by two priorities that most ship owners never managed to balance. He wanted it to be fast, and he wanted it to be comfortable. The outside was fitted with streamlined Durasteel plating that gave the ship a sleeker, more refined silhouette than the factory standard model. The forward cargo mandibles, originally designed to carry freight containers, were converted into an auxiliary craft launch, a modification that fundamentally changed the ship's profile and gave it a unique versatility. Military-grade deflector shield generators were installed, giving the Falcon survivability that far exceeded what a civilian freighter had any business carrying. Engine enhancements pushed the ship's atmospheric top speed to an impressive 745 miles per hour, and the hyperdrive was modified to a class that exceeded standard military specifications. Inside, Lando's personal style was stamped everywhere. Custom-built luxury cabins replaced the Spartan crew quarters of the original configuration. A sophisticated entertainment system and finely appointed interior touches made the Falcon feel less like a freighter and more like a private yacht designed for a man who refused to be uncomfortable regardless of what line of work he was in. Most famously, Lando maintained a dedicated closet for his collection of capes, a detail that tells you almost everything you need to know about what kind of ship owner Lando Calrissian was. Lando also flew the Falcon with his co-pilot, the droid L337, a self-assembled, highly opinionated navigator who had modified herself over the years to become something genuinely unique among droids. L337 was passionate, outspoken, and equipped with navigational capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. She knew hyperspace routes that standard Navi computers could not plot, and she flew the Falcon with a precision and confidence that matched her captain's own skills. Together, Lando and L337 used the Millennium Falcon to build a successful, if thoroughly illegal, career throughout the Imperial era. The Falcon's defining trial under Lando's ownership came when he was hired by a crew that included an ambitious young smuggler named Han Solo. The job was a coaxium heist on the planet Kessel, a mining colony that produced the raw hyperfuel that powered virtually every starship in the galaxy. The operation spiraled into chaos almost immediately. Imperial interference turned a calculated theft into a desperate escape, and when Lando was injured during the breakout, Han Solo grabbed the controls. What followed was the Kessel Run, and it made history. Han navigated the Millennium Falcon through the Maelstrom, a terrifying region of collapsed stars, gravitational anomalies, and debris fields surrounding Kessel. Standard pilots avoided this route because no Navi computer could reliably plot a safe path through it. But L337 was not a standard Navi computer. When her physical body was destroyed during the escape from Kessel's surface, Lando uploaded her consciousness into the Falcon's navigational system, and suddenly, the ship could do what other ships could not. With L337's routing and Han's piloting, the Millennium Falcon completed the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs, taking a dramatically shorter and far more dangerous route than anyone had ever managed. Chewbacca, who was present at the controls, later noted the real distance was closer to 13 parsecs. Han predictably insisted on rounding down. The triumph came at a devastating cost to the ship's appearance. By the time the Falcon landed on the planet Savareen, Lando's pristine modifications were largely gone. The auxiliary craft had been lost. The sleek exterior plating was stripped and battered. The ship looked, for the first time, like the iconic hunk of junk the galaxy would come to know. Lando, heartbroken at the state of his beloved vessel, retreated from the scene. He and Han parted on bitter terms, their relationship complicated by the events of the Kessel Run, the loss of L337, and the damage to the ship. Han pursued Lando to Numidian Prime, where he challenged him to a rematch at Sabacc. The game was legendary. Both men claimed the other cheated, and both men were probably right. The result was not. Han Solo walked away with the Millennium Falcon, and the ship entered the chapter of its life that would define it for the rest of galactic history. The ship Lando had named, modified, and loved had just passed to the man who would make it immortal, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Chapter 4: Han Solo's Falcon. For 10 years, Han Solo and Chewbacca flew the Millennium Falcon through every dangerous corner of the galaxy, and they made it look effortless. Han Solo's approach to the Millennium Falcon was almost the exact opposite of Lando's. Where Lando had polished and pampered, Han stripped and reinforced. He replaced what the Kessel Run had broken, made the modifications he needed, and deliberately left the ship looking as battered and unremarkable as possible. A worn-out freighter drew no attention. In the smuggling business, invisibility was often more valuable valuable than speed, though the Falcon, under Han's constant tinkering, had plenty of both. Over the decade that Han and Chewbacca flew together before the events of A New Hope, the Millennium Falcon accumulated a reputation that made it famous in the criminal underworld. Illegal modifications built up layer upon layer, some installed by Han, some by Chewbacca, some by mechanics they trusted in ports across the galaxy. The quad laser cannons mounted on the ship's dorsal and ventral positions gave it serious combat capability for a civilian vessel. Shield generators were repeatedly upgraded. The hyperdrive, that critical and perpetually temperamental system that would cause Han no end of grief, was modified and remodified until it achieved the Class 0.5 rating that made the Falcon, in theory, twice as fast through hyperspace as even the best Imperial military vessels. The Falcon's sublight engines, its sensor systems, its smuggling compartments hidden beneath the deck plating, all of it was shaped by Han's hands and Chewbacca's expertise over years of hard use. Yet the ship's greatest role was still ahead of it. Everything changed at a cantina in Mos Eisley on the desert planet Tatooine when a Jedi Master named Obi-Wan Kenobi sat down with Han Solo and offered him a charter. Kenobi, traveling with a young farm boy named Luke Skywalker, 2 droids, and a desperate need to reach the planet Alderaan, had heard that Han's ship was fast. Han confirmed it with characteristic confidence, citing the Kessel Run and claiming the Falcon could outrun Imperial warships. Luke Skywalker took one look at the battered freighter in its docking bay and called it a piece of junk. He was technically not wrong. He was also missing everything that actually mattered. The charter to Alderaan became the defining mission of the Falcon's life. Before the ship ever left Tatooine, stormtroopers attacked the docking bay, and the Falcon blasted its way out with TIE fighters in pursuit, making the jump to hyperspace just ahead of capture. When the ship emerged from hyperspace near Alderaan's coordinates, the planet was gone, destroyed by the Empire's Death Star. The Falcon was pulled into the Death Star by a tractor beam, setting in motion a chain of events that would reshape the entire galaxy. Han, Luke, and a rescued Princess Leia escaped the battle station, and then Han Solo did something no one expected. He came back. The Millennium Falcon swept in from above during the Battle of Yavin, its guns blazing, knocking Darth Vader's TIE fighter from Luke Skywalker's tail at the precise moment Luke needed a clear shot at the Death Star's exhaust port. Luke destroyed the Death Star, the rebellion survived, and the Millennium Falcon, a ship that had spent 60 years going nowhere in particular, had just changed the course of galactic history. The years that followed were filled with the chaos of a galaxy at war. At the Battle of Hoth, the Falcon's hyperdrive failed at the worst possible moment, a recurring theme that would test Han's patience repeatedly throughout the war. Han and Chewbacca were forced to hide from Imperial pursuit inside an asteroid field, making repairs under fire. They eventually made it to Cloud City on Bespin, where Lando Calrissian, now the Baron Administrator of the mining colony, offered them refuge. It was a trap. Darth Vader used the Falcon and its crew as bait to lure Luke Skywalker into a confrontation. Han Solo was frozen in carbonite. Lando, consumed by guilt at his betrayal, defected to the rebellion and helped Leia, Chewbacca, and the droids escape on the Millennium Falcon, a ship he had once owned and still clearly loved. They recovered Han from the crime lord Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine, reuniting the crew. And then came Endor. Han Solo led a ground mission to destroy the shield generator protecting the second Death Star, lending the Falcon to Lando one final time. Lando flew it into the Battle of Endor as part of the Rebel Alliance's assault fleet, diving into the second Death Star's superstructure with Wedge Antilles in his X-Wing at his side. They fired concussion missiles into the main reactor and raced for the exit as the station came apart around them, emerging from the explosion with seconds to spare. The Empire's greatest weapon was destroyed. The Galactic Civil War was effectively over, and the Millennium Falcon had played a role in ending it. A ship that had been called a piece of junk had just helped end an empire, but even legends do not retire gracefully, and the Falcon's story was far from finished. Chapter 5. After the War. The Battle of Endor brought the Galactic Empire to its knees, but it did not bring peace, and the Millennium Falcon flew through the chaos of what came after, though in two very different ways, depending on which timeline you follow. In the Legends continuity, the Millennium Falcon remained an active instrument of the New Republic for decades following the Battle of Endor. Han and Chewbacca flew the ship through the final campaigns to mop up Imperial remnants, including a mission to Kashyyyk, Chewbacca's home world, where they helped liberate thousands of Wookiee slaves still held under Imperial occupation. The Falcon participated in some of the New Republic's most critical early victories, carrying Han, Leia, and their allies through a galaxy still bleeding from years of war. In Legends, Han and Leia eventually married and had 3 children, the twins Jason and Jaina Solo, and a younger son named Anakin Solo. The Millennium Falcon remained their family ship, worn, beloved, and impossibly full of memories, as the Solo family built their lives in a galaxy slowly finding its footing under New Republic rule. Han stepped back from active smuggling, but never truly stepped back from the Falcon, tinkering with it endlessly and flying it whenever the galaxy called. The Legends timeline eventually stretched decades beyond Endor, taking the Falcon through the Yuuzhan Vong War, a catastrophic invasion by an extragalactic species that brought the New Republic to the edge of annihilation. The Yuuzhan Vong were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced. They were immune to the Force, their technology was biological rather than mechanical, and they came with the deliberate intention of destroying everything the New Republic had built. At one point during that war, Coruscant itself fell, the Solo family lost people they loved, and through all of it, the Millennium Falcon flew, battered, remodified, and completely outclassed on paper by the enemy it kept running from and fighting back against. The ship that had helped end the Empire refused to stop being useful in a galaxy that needed it to survive something far worse. The canon timeline tells a quieter and more tragic version of the aftermath. Han and Leia had a son, Ben Solo, but the pressures of their lives and the galaxy drove them apart. Han, without the war to fight and without Leia beside him, drifted. He lost the Falcon to a criminal named Gannis Duquesne, who subsequently lost it to 2 thieves known as the Irving Boys, who in turn lost it to the junk boss Unkar Plutt on the desert planet Jakku. The Falcon sat under a tarp on Jakku for years, stripped of parts, forgotten. The ship that had outrun Star Destroyers and flown through the core of a dying Death Star was being slowly picked apart for scrap on a dead world. It was the most inglorious chapter in the Falcon's history, and it is what makes what happened next so remarkable. Then, 2 people stumbled aboard it in a desperate run from Jakku's First Order occupation, a scavenger named Rey and a defected stormtrooper named Finn. The Falcon launched from Jakku's sand in rough condition, trailing components and firing in all directions. But it flew because the Millennium Falcon always flew. High above the planet, Han Solo and Chewbacca were waiting. They found their ship, and for one last time, Han Solo sat in the Millennium Falcon's cockpit and went to work. The Falcon flew Han to his death on Starkiller Base, where his son Ben, now the First Order commander Kylo Ren, killed him on a gantry above a thermal oscillator. Rey and Chewbacca escaped in the Falcon, and from that point forward, the ship belonged to a new generation. Rey flew it to Acto to find Luke Skywalker. She flew it at the Battle of Crait, threading through crystal caverns with Chewbacca at her side, drawing First Order TIE fighters away from the escaping resistance. She flew it to Exegol, the hidden Sith world, where a fleet assembled from across the galaxy, summoned by Lando Calrissian, who took the Falcon's controls one last time, destroyed the Sith Eternal, and ended Palpatine's final resurrection. A ship born on a factory floor, passed between criminals and loyalists and gamblers and heroes, had survived everything the galaxy could throw at it, and it had carried the fight to the very end. Chapter 6: Fastest Hunk of Junk. Every pilot who ever sat in the Millennium Falcon's cockpit said the same thing. The ship felt alive, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. It responded in ways that no stock freighter had any right to respond. It anticipated, it compensated, it survived things that should have killed it, and it did so with a consistency that went beyond engineering and into something pilots struggle to explain. Understanding why requires looking at what the Falcon actually became across 60 years of modifications, disasters, and the hands of people who refused to let it die. Start with what the Falcon was before it became anything at all. The baseline YT-1300F, the freight configured variant that rolled off the Corellian Engineering Corporation line around 60 BBY, was built to move cargo, not to matter. Its flat saucer hull minimized atmospheric drag. Its offset cockpit gave the pilot decent forward visibility. Its 2 mandibles up front held freight containers and nothing more. As a factory standard vessel, it was competent and completely forgettable. One of thousands of identical ships doing identical work across the galaxy. Nobody looked at a stock YT-1300 twice. That anonymity, it turned out, was one of the most useful things it ever had going for it. What transformed it began with Lando's military-grade deflector shields, a modification that gave the Falcon survivability far beyond civilian specs and laid the foundation for everything that came after. The engine enhancements Lando installed pushed the ship's speed dramatically above stock ratings. Then came the hyperdrive. The Falcon's Class .5 hyperdrive, the system that allowed Han Solo to brag with genuine justification, was the result of multiple modifications layered over decades of ownership. A Class 1 hyperdrive is considered the standard for military vessels. The Falcon's Class .5 system was, in theory, twice as fast, capable of plotting and executing jumps that left Imperial Star Destroyers unable to give chase once the ship cleared a gravity well. The catch, and there always was a catch, was that extreme modifications to a hyperdrive made the system temperamental to the point of near unreliability. This was not a minor inconvenience. This was the kind of failure that got people killed. The Empire Strikes Back made this legendary. The Falcon's hyperdrive failed repeatedly during the escape from Hoth, failed again at the asteroid field, and only jumped to lightspeed after R2-D2 discovered that Imperial technicians had deliberately sabotaged it at Cloud City. Han Solo spent more hours under the Falcon's deck plating, cursing at that hyperdrive, than almost any other activity in his adult life. And yet, when it worked, nothing in the galaxy could catch it. The L337 integration deserves its own recognition as one of the ship's defining technical characteristics. When Lando uploaded L337's droid mind into the ship's microaxial Rubicon astrogation computer after her destruction on Kessel, he gave the Falcon something that no Navicomputer algorithm could replicate: genuine navigational intuition. L337 had spent years developing her own hyperspace routing data, collecting knowledge of lanes and shortcuts and safe passages that standard charts did not contain. That knowledge, now resident in the Falcon's computer, explained many of the ship's remarkable navigational achievements. Crew members flying with the Falcon over the years reported a feeling that the ship seemed to anticipate routes, suggest alternatives, and respond to navigation problems with an almost organic intelligence. The ship, in a very real sense, carried L337's consciousness within it long after her body was gone. Han's own modifications over the decade before A New Hope added the combat capabilities that made the Falcon dangerous as well as fast. The dual quad laser cannons, one on the dorsal hull and one on the ventral, gave the ship genuine firepower against both fighters and larger targets. Sensor jammers allowed the Falcon to disappear from tracking systems in a way no legitimate civilian vessel had any business being able to do. The smuggling compartments hidden beneath the floor plating, the ones that conceal Luke, Han, Leia, and the droids from the Death Star's inspection teams, were standard on the Falcon before Han even owned it, but Han maintained them carefully and used them often. The ship also carried the scars of its history in its very structure. Landing gear legs lost during the Kessel Run were never fully replaced, giving the Falcon an asymmetric landing stance that veteran pilots had to account for. The sensor dish, the large circular radar array that sat atop the main hull, was lost at the Battle of Endor, replaced by a rectangular dish for the Falcon's later life. Each battle, each job, each desperate run left the ship slightly different from what it had been before. The Millennium Falcon was, in a meaningful sense, a palimpsest, a vessel written and rewritten by every hand that had ever held its controls. Every dent in the Falcon's hull was a story, every patch on its hull plating was a survival, and together they made it the most remarkable ship in the galaxy, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. Chapter 7: The Falcon's Legacy. Every generation that has told the story of the Star Wars galaxy has eventually come back to this ship. There is a reason for that. The Millennium Falcon is not the biggest ship in the galaxy, nor the most powerful, nor the most technologically advanced. It is a 60-year-old freighter held together by the mechanical genius of a Wookiee, the stubborn pride of its pilots, and what might generously be described as optimism about the hyperdrive. And yet, the list of what the ship has done reads like the history of the galaxy itself. The Millennium Falcon was present at the Battle of Yavin, where the first Death Star died. It flew through the second Death Star's collapsing structure at the Battle of Endor. It answered the call at Exegol when the galaxy needed someone to come. It carried Obi-Wan Kenobi to his final mission, transported Luke Skywalker to his destiny, sheltered Princess Leia, smuggled droids carrying the plans that saved the rebellion, and served as home to Han Solo and Chewbacca for the most important years of either of their lives. It later carried Rey, a young woman from nowhere with nothing, across the galaxy to face every challenge the dark side could create. In the Legends timeline, the Falcon served the New Republic through decades of further conflict, passing into the history of the Solo family and the wider galactic story as one of its most enduring constant presences. In canon, it endures as a ship that has outlived the people who loved it most and keeps flying with the ones who love it now. Both continuities agree on what the Millennium Falcon ultimately represents: the idea that the most valuable things in the galaxy are not always the most impressive at first glance. that a ship, a worn, imperfect, perpetually unreliable ship, can become greater than its specifications through the weight of what it has survived and the quality of who has flown it. That history is not made by the strongest or fastest or the most polished. It is made, more often than not, by whoever refuses to quit. The Millennium Falcon has been refusing to quit since 60 BBY. Every generation of Star Wars storytelling finds a reason to bring it back, and that reason is simple. Some ships carry cargo, some carry firepower, the Falcon carried history, and it kept flying long after everyone expected it to stop. She may not look like much, but she's always had it where it counts. The Falcon spent 60 years passing through the hands of people shaped by a galaxy in motion. Criminals, loyalists, soldiers, and survivors. That galaxy had more stories running through it than any single ship could carry. If this history left you with more questions than answers, the description has 2 videos that are worth your time. The first examines the 20 best ships in Star Wars through a single lens, livability, setting aside firepower and prestige to ask which vessels were actually built for the people inside them. The second examines the true reasoning behind Palpatine's decision to start the Clone Wars, the political maneuvering, the manufactured crises, and the long game that reshaped the Republic from within. Watch them next.